and often delights. It's a story of the world, and it's one with many endings. The 5-star global network fly to over 90 destinations on board one of the world's youngest fleets. Qatar Airways, world's 5-star airline.
We do accept that there was very bad mistakes made in our banking area.
Behind the headlines,
most South Koreans are not interested in reunification.
Is the inside story, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Libya's ambassador to the United States resigns from what he calls a dictatorship regime, but Muammar Gaddafi says he's still in charge. Hello, welcome to Al Jazeera Live from Doha. I'm Shuli Ghosh. We have extensive coverage of the ongoing events in Libya. Libyan fighter jets target army ammunition depots and command centres to prevent troops from joining the protesters.
And I'm Jamal Al-Shayal on the Egyptian-Libyan border, where up to 16,000 Egyptians have now fled the violence.
And rescue missions head to Libya as foreign nationals try to escape the violence. Will be on the Libyan border with Tunisia. Hello there, thanks for joining us with our ongoing coverage of events in Libya. Let's just give you a reminder of the latest developments there. Libya's ambassador to the United States has resigned. He says he no longer wants to serve a dictatorship regime. Reports are coming in that Libya's side of Egypt's border is now in anti-government hands. Jordan is urging the Libyan government to end civilian bloodshed and exercise self-restraint. And Turkey has sent 2 Sea Cat rescue ships to evacuate its citizens from Libya. The Netherlands also sending a plane to help evacuate its nationals. According to Italian officials, marine oil terminals in Libya have been halted. The United Nations Human Rights Chief has raised the possibility of crimes against humanity in Libya. But Muammar Gaddafi's former aide has said that the country's leader will neither leave nor step down. While Egypt's military government says it's reinforced its border with Libya. It also says it will open a crossing on the coastal border to enable the sick and the injured to leave Libya. Jamal El-Shail joins us live from Saloum in Egypt, which is near the Libyan border. Jamal, just tell us what scenes you're seeing as people cross out of Libya back into Egypt.
Well, surely hundreds of busloads of Egyptians have been coming here, taking those who have been fleeing the violence. A moment ago, I spoke to the Egyptian military who are administering the Egyptian side, and they tell me that so far up to 16,000 Egyptians have crossed over in the past 24 hours. The tales of these people are tales of desperation, are tales of horror and of shock as to what they claim to have seen on the Libyan side. They are tales of African mercenaries killing randomly. There are tales of apparently Libyan fighter jets and helicopter gunships shooting discriminately, and there are general tales of horrific death and destruction. Obviously, it's difficult for us to verify these things from where we're standing, but just judging by the faces of a lot of these people and the passion in which they've been speaking, there is no doubt that there is a huge problem that is taking place on the other side of the border, Shuli.
Have you seen many injured people? Are there provisions being made for dealing with injuries?
There definitely are provisions that have been made. I visited a makeshift or mobile hospital that's been set up by the Egyptian authorities just a few kilometers from here. However, I have to say I'm yet to see any injured coming through. Asking a lot of the people, they say, well, very simply that they can't get to the injured, and the ambulances themselves that are in Libya are already overstretched. Added to that, the hospitals themselves are facing a huge shortage in much needed and fundamental equipment and supplies. For example, type A and type B blood is at a huge shortage. The Egyptian side here, in terms of the government, the military, as well as mainly non-governmental organizations, the Egyptian Doctors Union, Doctors Syndicate, have already been across the border, and several are on their way. Amongst them, they have much needed aid in terms of blood supply, up to 1,000 bags of blood and other much needed equipment. Obviously, the problem is the lack of security. The problem is the lack of government, at least on the eastern side of the country, where the government has vanished, essentially.
There's obviously a lot of activity going on around you, Jamal. I know it's very noisy there for you, but what are people saying about the border situation on the Libyan side of the border? Because we're hearing that that is actually under the control of armed men who are anti-Gaddafi.
Indeed, everyone who has crossed over has concurred that and confirmed to us that it is now in the control of anti-Gaddafi opposition figures and the opposition movement. In fact, they tell me all of the eastern province until roughly 900 kilometers outside of Tripoli, that entire part of the country, according to the witnesses who have come across here, is now under the control of the opposition or the anti-Gaddafi movement. They say that they've managed to bring onto their side many of the armed forces, many of the influential tribes who were in the past obviously supporting Gaddafi but now have turned against him. I've spoken to 2 Libyans who have crossed over onto the border and have shown me their passports, and they have no Libyan stamp of exit, which seems to prove the fact that it is under the control of the opposition, surely.
And what are relations like between the 2 countries, between Egypt and Libya? Because weren't there accusations that Egyptian activists had been perhaps responsible in some way for provoking the unrest in Libya?
Well, yes, a few days ago when Saif al-Islam Gaddafi's son, gave his televised address, he tried to hint that it was Egypt and Tunisia that was trying to spur the violence. Obviously, speaking to people inside Libya and those who have crossed over, the situation seems completely contrary, that this is in fact born opposition from the Libyan people. The Egyptian government so far has been taking a more escalating and stronger stance against the Libyan regime. It is holding the Libyan government and Gaddafi in particular responsible for the well-being and safety of all its citizens who are there. Obviously, Egypt itself is in political turmoil after the revolution of a week and so ago, and therefore that is causing some sort of problems in terms of who the Egyptians in Libya should turn to. Obviously, the Egyptian military say they have set up some sort of hotline, the Egyptian Foreign Ministry as well, a hotline for those stranded inside Libya. But because of the sheer amount of Egyptians living in Libya, it is difficult for them to get through. A lot of them say they spent all night trying to get through, and in the end, they decided to risk the journey themselves to the border. We're talking of up to 1 million Egyptians living inside Libya. So as you can imagine, with a not so functional Egyptian government right now, and that sheer number of people inside Libya, coupled with the fact that there is this huge amount of violence taking place across the border, it is making their situation there extremely dangerous.
Jamal, thanks very much indeed for that update. Jamal El-Shail on the Egyptian-Libyan border there.